Over 300 million people see his BBC newspaper review. He has been decorated with the OBE medal for services rendered to the economy and international trade. In his talk, he makes data dance by bringing it to life. He collides the mind-boggling statistics on economic growth, wealth creation, and social justice that explode, inspire, and uplift so that many women and ethnic minorities succeed and participate in growth at the same rate as other groups. Please welcome Alpesh Patel, OBE.
Thank you. And I love that introduction because that's the first time on a Zoom I've had a round of applause, which probably says a lot about my Zoom skills. I also am most grateful for that lovely introduction because I want to hear that guy speak, the one you were introducing. I hope I can live up to that. Now, what I've done with this talk is, and I'm sure all be grateful to hear this, I've killed the slides. I'm going to make them available after the talk, but you're not going to be looking at a PowerPoint. I'm going to be able to see some of the statistics, so I can share them with you verbally, but you're going to be listening to me and you're going to be watching me, which I think is how Toastmasters are reputed for doing things, making sure that it is the speaker who engages on whichever topic. And I have a subtitle for my talk as well. The shocking disadvantages by gender and skin color and the price white men are paying, and the rest of us as well for that. And I'm specifically going to look at finance as an industry. I have surprisingly quite a large number of followers on TikTok, and it's probably not what you were expecting me to say. And one thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of people who are interested in going into finance, young people looking to go into finance, looking to go into entrepreneurship. Well, whatever color they are, whatever gender they are, what does the future hold for them when we look at some of the data? And as I was preparing the slides for this, as I was looking into the data, and about 20 years ago, I wrote a book with my sister for women entrepreneurs. I was shocked that in 20 years, there's been next to no change in the data. And I'm going to share some of the statistics with you. Now, that's not to put you off, whether you are white, brown, black, whether you are male, female, whatever gender or race. It is to say, thankfully, and I'm going to leave you with hope and inspiration, that's my goal, that thankfully being aware of some of these statistics will be able to better guide your careers, whether you are starting out in your 20s or whether you're in your 50s and looking to progress to the next level. So what are the insights that I can share in that field? And that's what I want to do now. The sources of data that I have used, come everywhere from the Kaufman organization, which is well known for monitoring this kind of material, Goldman Sachs, CNN, and Harvard Business Review, and a bunch of academic studies. Again, when I make the slides available at the end of this talk, you will have the links to dive deeper into that, should you wish to do so, and I'd highly recommend it. So let's start off, first of all, with ethnicity, and I will interlace that with gender as well. Now, here's something which, again, I found disappointing and shocking. Prior to COVID-19, new Black-owned businesses started with 3 times less capital compared to white-owned businesses. Now, you might say, well, that's due to historical legacies. It could be the types of businesses. It could be cultural. It could be socioeconomic. It could be all sorts of factors. And of course, there are all sorts of factors. We can reason away and excuse anything. But what's more important is, what are the implications for the rest of us? I've got a friend in the civil service who happens to be white and male, and he says to me that sometimes it feels like you're you're being sort of beaten upon for all the world's problems. And I tease him back, and you can imagine what I say to him. I say, yes, well, they are your fault, of course. But on a serious note, what does this mean if the burden isn't just falling on the ethnic minority, but of course, those already in a position of strength and advantage economic well-being? And that means it's a bigger problem. I want you to imagine something. Imagine that you're looking, there's a concentric circle and you're sitting in the middle of it. Okay, so a series of circles, you're in the middle of it. And if we were to do something in our career or in our jobs which benefits us, great, fantastic. Let's say in the next circle is your family, and you receive a benefit or you do something which helps not just you, but your family. Even better, you're happier, you're more fulfilled as a result. Outside of that is the broader community, maybe the people you employ, maybe the people you help mentor, maybe the taxes you pay. So paying tax doesn't really make you feel fulfilled, but a bigger purpose that you're providing, that you feel that your work is doing something beyond just yourself. And we know the more concentric circles you impact, the more fulfilled you're going to be, and the happier you're going to be, and the more likely you're going to look back on your life and feel better for it. Now imagine, based on that data, and that's the first one, that Black-owned businesses started with 3 times less in terms of overall capital as compared to white-owned businesses. Imagine that there is this massive segment of society which will not be able to impact those broader circles, those ripples in the sea, as it were, that they could impact, improve, and uplift. That isn't just a problem for them. That isn't just a problem of social justice. That's a problem for white men as well, and the rest of society. And I'll show you statistically why it's a bigger problem than we might have imagined. We might say, well, we're aware of ethnic and gender gaps, but actually what we're not aware of is how wide they are and how much a problem it is for the rest of us, people such as myself who are doing very well. I'm in private equity. I set up a hedge fund. I'm an unlikely person to have done that, but it's also a bigger problem for me and my children. And not just for some theoretical concept of justice, but actually in hard economic terms. So whether you've got an interest in justice or in the economy, either way, it becomes a problem. Inc. magazine, a major entrepreneur magazine in the US, said the 5,000 fastest growing companies in America that it monitored with the help of the Kaufman organization found their sources of funding in the case of 67% of them, 67% of the 5,000 fastest growing companies, and you might want to be employed by them or you might want to start one of those. 67% of them, the capital came from personal savings. If your personal savings are reduced by gender, by race, you're less likely to be the founder of a fast growing company. You might, well, tough, do something else, sweep the roads instead, or do something which is more suited to your wallet. You're right. You're right. That is what you'll end up having to do. But that's not the problem. The problem isn't that you might not get a job elsewhere, that you might have to go somewhere else. But it is the impact of that lost talent, which when we start measuring it, as opposed to speaking about it in general terms that, oh, the poor lost talent, the person who could have been the founder of the next Apple. When we look at the actual statistics and we see the pain points it's causing the rest of us who think we're not impacted, that's what I'll come to. And that's what gets very scary, and that we have to do something about it. We all know we're impacted more by things which directly impact us. Otherwise, the environment wouldn't be a problem. Things that we can free ride and hope somebody else will solve and that only cause minor daily problems to us, of course, we tend not to react to. But if we get the data on it and we're more aware of it, maybe as with climate, maybe we're more likely to act on it. So think about when we've got gender and we've got race and fewer personal savings, you're less likely to start one of those companies. It gets worse. 51% of those 5,000 fastest growing companies relied on bank loans. Guess which gender and ethnic groups are less likely to get bank loans? Now, this is not to say that bank managers are racist. That's not what it says. Equally, it's not necessarily to jump to a broader conclusion that institutional racism exists in banking. You can fill in the gaps if you wish, but I want to focus on actual data. The data says bank loans are a major source for setting up those businesses. And if you come from either one of the genders or the ethnic groups, which is less likely to get one, you're less likely to set up those businesses. You say, well, that's fine, Alpesh. We know there's a problem to be solved. What do we do about it? Before we get to what do we do about it, actually, how big is this problem? And as I'm going to explain, it's bigger than you think. By the way, 34% of the capital for the 5,000 fastest growing companies came from credit cards. Guess who and which groups are less likely to get credit cards and credit card be able to get those borrowings through that? Gets worse. So you think, well, maybe they've got some other resources. 20%, 1/5 relied on family. Well, family is as less likely to have the capital as you are, given they're going to be connected to you by ethnicity at least. Okay, so the problem starts compounding. You go from personal savings to bank loans to credit cards, you go back down to family on every single group. So then you go, okay, well, what's after that, Alpesh? Where else should I look for if I'm looking to set up my own businesses? And I get every single day, because of my work with the UK government, I get every single day groups coming up to me saying, we want to raise money for our businesses. And I'm going to, at the end of this talk, show you how we've listed every single source of UK funding, from grants to loans to venture capital to angel investment, and how to pitch for it to try and put the scales just a little bit more in your favor. So what comes after family? Business acquaintances. And there's an old saying, your net worth is determined by your networks. Well, the chances are your networks are going to be equally limited. And again, I'll share with you on the data why that's the case. I'm not saying rich white men all stick together, but what I'm saying is we've got a social problem with that interaction between groups, and that's a minor thing that can be done. 20 years ago, I was the co-founder of the UK chapter of the world's largest entrepreneur mentoring organization. The world's largest entrepreneur mentoring organization is an organization born out of Silicon Valley called TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs, TIE.org. And its founders included the founder of Hotmail. People like Bill Gates regularly give talks there. When I was out in Silicon Valley before COVID, I met the CEO of Zoom. You were able to do that. Just walk up on stage. It was an environment which you could network. There was no secret handshakes. There were no extortionate entrance fees, nothing like that. It was created to break down those social barriers and make sure entrepreneurs who have made it can connect with those who want to make it, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity. And we had to do a lot to break those gender barriers, because guess who on the first event filled the room? Men. And we asked some of the women, well, why didn't more of you come along? I said, well, do you know what it feels like to be in a room where 90% of the people are of a different gender? And I said, no, I don't. Until I once, at the invitation of a bank, went to a women's networking event. And I thought, contrary to what I thought I would think, I thought to myself, this feels awkward, doesn't feel right, doesn't feel like I belong. When we create those kinds of organizations which turn things on their heads with intent, you're then able to help those groups lift up. And there's a reason it's the world's largest mentoring organization, because it does something right and lifts those people up. And by the way, over the years, it has created billionaires. You might think, well, that's not a measure of success. There are many others. Indeed, you're right. There are billionaires out of women and out of ethnic minorities, let alone other groups. Okay, so let me share another statistic with you. While at least 77% of venture capital is invested in white men, and this is not a white man bashing talk by any means, only 1% of venture-backed founders are Black. Now, again, we might come up with excuses. Oh, the supply's not there. That's a common one. Oh, there's not enough people. They don't come forward. Well, why don't they come forward? Maybe they're not surrounded by the networks who've already done it. Maybe they don't know who to speak to. So how do we close that information gap, that gap of know-how and networks? That's a key problem. And I'll come to solving that problem in a second and why it benefits all of us, especially, as I sort of slightly said tongue in cheek, as Rudyard Kipling might have said, if this is all the white man's burden, if they're the ones paying all the taxes, earning all the money, well, let's ease the burden on the poor white chap, okay? The disparity in the median net worth between white families, $171,000, and black families, $17,000. Let me say that again. The median net worth between white families, 171,000, okay, 171,000, and black families, 17,000, illustrates a wealth gap that greatly inhibits the ability to start up and create generational wealth. Guess how well, remember what I said about startups and businesses, and that leads to greater choices. Family you rely on, the networks you rely on. If you start off at a smaller amount, then it's not going to get passed down. That gap, 171 to 17, that's not just, it's just 10%, Alpesh. They've just got to work a bit harder. Somebody said to me on one of my TikTok posts when I was talking about race, they said, yeah, you should just got to work harder. I can work hard. I can work twice as hard. I can work 3 times as hard. There ain't enough days, there ain't enough hours in the day for me to bridge a gap between 17 and 171 unless you can give me a time machine. So what is to be done? Is the task just too big to actually even bother with? And don't forget, part of this is not us and them. It's not ethnic minorities or females versus male or versus white. This is a burden. The burden has to be shared by somebody. And guess who the burden who's doing the heavy lifting? Based upon Office of National Statistics data, 34,000 scale-up SMEs, 34,000, this is in the UK, 34,000 alone represent £1 trillion to the economy. So why does this data all matter? Because 34,000, that's not a big number. 34,000 UK small businesses represent £1 trillion to the UK economy. We're going through COVID. We are more aware than ever the benefits of an economy able to tap into capital and throw that money at PPE, throw that money at hospitals and say, yeah, we're going to get the vaccine, we're going to invent the vaccine, we're going to distribute the vaccine, we're going to create standby hospitals, we will do whatever it takes. To have that economic firepower, guess where that money comes from? It comes from SMEs. 80% of the UK GDP, and it's the same for any advanced economy, comes from small companies, the type that we want women and ethnic minorities to set up should they wish to. At the moment, even if they wish to, they can't do it. £1 trillion from just 34,000 companies. Think of that as 34,000 followers. 34,000 people in Britain contribute £1 trillion to the economy. And in case you're wondering, the size of our economy is only a couple of trillion. It's only a few trillion. We're not talking, oh, well, that's just part of 100. We're not $100 trillion economy, okay? You can move the needle by having a few thousand people more starting businesses, but they don't have the capital. The Rose Review and work by the British Business Bank showed that all female founder teams, all female, so if the founders are only women, get less than 1% of venture capital funding. Guess what happens if they're all men? No problem. Less than 1% of venture capital funding goes to women-only teams. And you might say, well, of course, there's good reason for that. They're less likely to succeed, aren't they? Become self-fulfilling. It becomes self-fulfilling. Failure becomes self-fulfilling. You can't outwork that statistic. You can't say, well, they've just got to work harder. They've got to be smarter. They've got to be a bit cleverer. And then you might say, well, the Starling Bank, that's £1 billion business created by a woman. And you'll give one example and we all go away and feel happy that there was some statistic out there, which of course doesn't prove the general point is wrong. Europe is even worse, I'm afraid. Britain's great compared to Europe. Europe is really stark. Less than 1% of founders across the continent are black. Less than 1% of VC funding goes to black men, and less than 0.006% to black women. So if you're a black woman, you've got a 1 in, I can't even do the math when it comes to 0.006. What is that? 1/60,000? And you might say, well, yeah, of course, there's far fewer of them. Even on a per capita basis, that is disproportionate. Oh, well, they're not, culturally, they're not interested in setting up businesses. There isn't data to support that. There isn't something in the DNA or sequencing or chromosomes that they've discovered that if you happen to be black, you've got less ambition to set up your own business. That's not the case. There's nothing when they've looked at genetics to say that that's the case. In the UK, there are around 250,000 ethnic minority SMEs, okay? 250,000 ethnic minority SMEs, 5% of all. 5% come from SMEs. They contribute £25 billion to the UK economy each year. £25 billion. It clearly makes sense to have more of these types of businesses. You might say, well, no, wait a minute. That might be costing us in nursing. You don't want nurses leaving to set up SMEs. That's not the problem. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not a zero-sum game at all. But what it is doing is it's costing the broader economy. It means we're getting fewer hospitals because of this. So it does impact me, whatever gender I am, whatever race I am, because if they are sitting doing something else rather than contributing to the economy, and you might say, well, they might want to sit in deck chairs on a beach all day. British weather doesn't really warrant that. It is a loss to the economy, but it's the size of the statistics. Randstad, another research organization, suggests that the UK economy would be £24 billion larger each year if individuals from black and ethnic minority backgrounds progress their careers, so forget business, progress their careers at the same rate as their white counterparts. That's not to say we should be demoting people by color or positively discriminating by color. That's not what I'm saying. Showing the statistic first, then we better look at some solutions, because the problem is so big it's impacting the rest of us, like the climate. You can't feel it on a day-to-day basis. And you always think as a free rider, somebody else will sort it. Greta will do it. Someone somewhere will talk about it and do it. Well, this is just as big a problem impacting the rest of us. The UK economy would be £24 billion larger if black and ethnic minority backgrounds progress their careers at the same rate. Again, you might say, well, maybe they're just culturally don't want to progress in their careers. If you can show me the evidence, I'd like to see it. Maybe they're just not as ambitious. Doesn't really stack up from what we know. And I want you to consider this, by the way. There are no black CEOs or chief financial officers or chairs in the FTSE 100. Now, that's my area. I'm in the investment sphere. So this particularly strikes me. You might say, well, again, what's the problem, Alpesh? So what? There's supply and demand. It takes time. They've only been in this country really in sizable numbers since the late 1960s. So, yeah, it takes time, There are no. You might say, well, why is that a problem? Well, let me give you another statistic. Since Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates stepped down from Microsoft and Satya Nadella took over, ethnic minority, Microsoft has risen by about 70% in market cap. 70% it's grown since he took over. You guys say, well, it's got nothing to do with his race. It may well have nothing to do with his race. Microsoft is larger than all the FTSE 100 companies combined. All the largest listed British companies on the London stock market, the 100 largest combined, which, by the way, have no black CEOs or CFOs, and there might be no causal link at all of them combined add all their market cap, and we're talking Barclays, British Petroleum, Shell, so we're talking pretty large companies, okay? Put them all together, they're not as big as one Indian CEO'd company. And you say, well, it's got nothing to do with the color of his skin. No, it may well not, until we look at some of the other data on diversity of boards and the likelihood of creating wealth, which pays taxes and pays for my hospitals. So in one sense, what I'm saying is we better have more diverse boards, because I want better bloody hospitals. That's why. And I don't want to put all the burden on the poor white man either, who's overworking, wants a break. Lloyds Bank revealed in December 2020, that the median pay gap between Black employees and their peers is about 20%, while the median bonus gap, so forget the median pay gap, you say, well, more Black people are at the bottom end and not at the top. So of course and 20% is not too bad, Alpesh, yeah. Well, the bonus gap is 37%. Of course, when you dig into the data, you can come up with explanations as to why and what jobs they're doing and all sorts of clever reasons why it's fair, it's okay. The Rose Review suggests that up to £250 billion of new value, £250 billion of new value could be added to the UK economy if women started and scaled new businesses at the same rate as UK men. We're not forcing them to be entrepreneurs. What we're saying is we suspect that the rate at which they're starting them at the moment is below what they want to do. We're not saying it should be 50-50 necessarily. Because, I mean, if I ask my wife, do you want to set up a business? She goes, no, I want to look after our son. And there might be many more like it, for instance. However, the gap is so wide. That's not the problem. It's not traditional gender roles. The problem is it's so wide that it's clearly an injustice that they can't start them up at the same rate. And if they could, £250 billion more in value added to the UK economy, that's great. My tax burden would go down, because there'll be somebody else carrying that burden and paying for it. I'd get better hospitals. I'd get better roads. I'd get better public services. That's all benefit to me, basically, by making somebody else do the hard work. And as a CEO of a company, I'm all about making somebody else do the hard work. I want more women doing the hard work, setting up businesses, to put it slightly tongue in cheek. But there's an injustice as well, of course. The injustice is they're sitting there wanting to set up those businesses and they're not allowed to. That's an injustice which should hurt all of us. Female workers in the UK are retiring with around £70,000 less in their pensions than men. £70,000 less. So think about those little old ladies. Let me appeal to your emotion. Female workers in the UK are retiring with £70,000 less in their pensions. And you might say, well, they had lower paid jobs. Did they choose them, or were they forced to? Yes, it's not about equality of outcome. It's not about 50-50, but it is about equality of opportunity. They didn't even have the choice, then that's an injustice. And by lack of choice, I mean they didn't get to sit anywhere on the bus. They had to sit at the back. That's what we mean by lack of choice. And that's costing them in their old age. And that means the gap gets filled by the rest of us. That's what it actually means. How do financial outcomes of homogenous venture capital firms, again, an area that I know very well, how do financial outcomes of homogenous venture capital firms compare to those with diverse groups? Well, the effect of shared ethnicity reduced the investment success rate by 30%. You are less likely to make a successful investment as a venture capital firm if your firm was ethnically homogenous compared to one which had diverse backgrounds. That means you were a poorer investment outfit as a result. Venture capital firms, and this is true not just for venture capital, my area, but for law firms, for accountancy firms, venture capital firms that increased their proportion of female partner hires by 10% saw an average of a 1.5% spike in overall fund returns. 1.5% in my business is a game changer. 10% increase in female partner hires, 1.5% spike in fund returns each year, and had 9.7% more profitable exits. They had almost 10% more profitable exits. Now that's impressive when you consider only 30% of all VC investments are profitable exits at all. 70% are unprofitable. 30% exits are profitable. You had a 10% uplift by just having 10% more women in your group. That diversity benefit you get through hard data. Hard data tells you the benefits, and that's not just one. There is tons of data. As when I was preparing this talk, that I came across, not just, as I said, from Harvard and all these other resources. So what I'm going to suggest to you is two things. One is recognizing the data. We better do something about it, because it affects, like I said, slightly tongue-in-cheek, the poor white man who's carrying the burden, as Rudyard Kipling said, but it actually affects all of us. We're getting poorer services. Like the climate, we're going to feel the pain each year, micro on a daily basis, and it starts building up. Not just the injustices that we hear, that it's unfair. If you want to see the slides, they're on my LinkedIn page. I've created 2 free resources to try and level this up somewhat, and we've been doing it in our firm as well. Tech2great.com, great.com, for all those entrepreneurs out there, especially when every single funding source is out there, business plan templates, how to pitch for capital. Tech and then the 2 great.com. That teaches you how to pitch, where to apply for money, and which are also specifically targeting women and ethnic minorities, as well as, if you happen to be white and male, it's for you as well. And then from my background in investing, campaignfor1million.com, Campaign for a Million. It's to teach 1 million people how to be better investors, how to manage their pensions better, how to overcome that hurdle of lack of knowledge, that fear that it's not for them, so that their pensions are better, produce more returns, and their money works harder for them. So campaignfor1million.com and tech2great.com, and all the statistics I've given and the sources from which I've got them are on my LinkedIn profile. Thank you very much. I think I've closed just a little bit over time. I think I've overshot. I'm going to hand back.
Alpesh, thank you so much for that talk. It's an absolute privilege to hear you talk, and what you did talk about, those statistics were shocking, and you delivered them so passionately, and I love the humor that you used. And I have to say, I'm sure that we are all grateful that you did ditch the slides. We all have been subject to death by PowerPoint, and the way that you just told us those statistics, I think, made a huge impact on all of us. So thank you so much. It was brilliant, and I identified with so much of what you said. I worked in real estate, so I've been that one woman in a room full of men, and I love the story that you've actually felt that and felt what the opposite feels like, because you just don't know until you have experienced it.
I was really surprised, and it was a banking event for women entrepreneurs, and when you go through that, it changes your attitude completely on the injustice of it all, because you personally experience it. And until you do it, you can laugh it off. You say, oh, how wonderful, you're in a room full of women, great. It's not that at all. You do feel awkward, and you can see why they don't want to be in a room full of men.
Yeah, and we're just getting some comments in about how much everyone really enjoyed the presentation style. I'm sure lots of people, obviously we're Toastmasters, and we like to learn from fantastic speakers, and I'm sure we learned a lot from the content of your talk, but also the way that you delivered it. And also part of what really resonated with me is some of the things that you were talking about, and Toastmasters, in terms of the value of network. And I think Toastmasters is an incredible network, and very beneficial to be part of it. And I can see in the audience we do have, fortunately, a very diverse network in Toastmasters. And the other thing is, it's a voluntary organisation, and I loved what you were talking about those ripples. And I think anyone in Toastmasters, that's important to us, that we want to make an impact in the community as well. So from that perspective, I think it's been so valuable to everyone here. And I know that I think everyone can probably find you relatively easy. I'll try and put it in the chat if I can, your LinkedIn profile, and the fact that we can take action by looking at those slides and following up and looking at those websites you mentioned, so that we can take action and try and change things, which can only happen, I guess, if all of us together try and do something about it. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I'll share the LinkedIn as well. The reason I've done the LinkedIn is because of that point, that your net worth is determined by your networks. And I want to walk the talk and say to people, connect with me, rather than, give a talk and then everybody forgets about it, but to say, no, I'll walk the talk with you. And I'm trying to find the chat so I can share the link, my LinkedIn, but you'll pretty easily be able to find me. Now that you know what I look like, people will be able to find me on LinkedIn. Do connect with me on LinkedIn.